Edward Teach, Edward Tech, and finally, Blackbeard. These are all of the names of the one famous pirate who sailed the seas in the 1700s. Born to be said in 1680, many people believe that he was born in Bristol, UK. But in the book called The Last Day of Blackbeard the Pirate by Kevin Duffus, it was said that he was actually born right here in Goose Creek, South Carolina. His parents owned a farm and lived there. Many people think that Blackbeard was a man who killed for a living, but that was not the case. Although his pirating time was so very short, in just a few years, he was able to exchange a lot, and it was sometimes more than just items. It was even people. He encountered many and explored numerous places. From an early age, Blackbeard became a privateer, which is basically legalized piracy. This was while the Queen Anne's War was taking place. Privateering consisted of the government authorizing private ships to attack and capture enemy merchant vessels. The proceeds were split between the Queen and the crew of the privateer. As the war ended, so did most of the privateering crews. As Blackbeard and many other of his crew members were laid off, they would have nothing else to do with their lives. Blackbeard and many others turned to piracy. Blackbeard served several years under another captain on a ship until 1717. In 1717, he stole Stede Bonnet's ship, called the Revenge, and renamed it Queen Anne's Revenge, in honor of the war who made him lose his job as a privateer. This was Blackbeard's first experience of full-on exploration. He had stolen his first ever ship and was now forming his own crew to go sail the seas and steal from every other ship he could find. Along the way, he created his own flag. It was a skeleton holding a knife or sword and piercing a heart. This was to show merciless death. Blackbeard was one of the most notorious pirates ever. He caused a reign of fear wherever he went. Blackbeard stood over 6 feet tall and had a long black beard. To scare off people in battle, he would stick hemp roses under his hat and light them on fire to intimidate the men he was stealing from. After Blackbeard's adventure of stealing the 60-some slaves from the slave trade ship in the spring of 1718, his next adventure would be the biggest, most famously known encounter that he has ever had. Because he was in the Caribbean and in very hot weather, himself and his crew had gotten plagued with a disease they picked up along the trip. They were in need of medical supplies. The closest port was Charleston, South Carolina. He had not planned to set sail there, but it was his only choice. Blackbeard sailed in with Queen Anne's Revenge and 3 to 5 other ships. He had about 400 men with him as he arrived on the coast of South Carolina. Some were the slaves he had stolen, some were the men who followed him when he became captain, and some were just ships who wanted to be on his side because they did not want to fight against him. The blockade lasted for about 5 days. He was there for an exchange of medical supplies. Before he made his full appearance, he sent his crew to capture people on land so he could hold them hostage in exchange for the supplies. He threatened to kill them if he did not get his supplies in a certain amount of time.
All the persons that were in possession and burned their ships, and he would cross the bar and burn every ship that lay before the town and beat you down about your ears.
As the days and nights went on, the ships led by Blackbeard were still stationed on the coast, not letting anyone in or out. Blackbeard's men were exhausted and just wanted to sleep and eat, but they were deprived of that. Finally, on day 5, Blackbeard's bargain goals were met, and as he promised, he gave the prisoners back. But that was only after he basically robbed them for everything they had. Most of them walked back partially naked. He released them only after he got his chest full of medical supplies he had been waiting for. The Charleston blockade was one of Blackbeard's most famous encounters. It's a symbol to show how exactly he exchanged people for certain items he needed. After the blockade, Blackbeard was back to exploration. Shortly after he left Charleston, the Queen Anne's Revenge sank and he boarded a new ship called the Adventure. He sailed up the Pamlico River into a town in North Carolina. He was looking for freedom from being the most wanted pirate there was. He went searching for a way to get pardoned, which is basically becoming free from all the crime you've done, but you still get to ransack ships. Governor Charles Eden granted Blackbeard the pardon and told the court to set forward and make him a privateer. After that, Blackbeard married a woman named Mary Ormond. He promised her that he would give up piracy. After a while of settling down in a town of Bath, North Carolina, he started to miss pirating. Blackbeard had set up a private smuggling operation and was soon back to his old ways. Soon after that, Blackbeard learned that the governor of Pennsylvania issued an arrest warrant for him, one of the many that he had. He sailed away to Bermuda. When the locals of Virginia heard about the pardoning of Blackbeard, they did not approve of Eden's actions. After all of the terrible things Blackbeard has done, they refused to trust that pirate. In return to his actions, they asked the governor of Virginia, Thomas Spotswood, to protect them from Blackbeard. As a wonderful primary source, Spotswood issued a proclamation that offered an incentive to the person who captured Blackbeard and his shipmates, either dead or alive. The race to find Blackbeard and capture him was on. After all of the deadly exchanges and bad encounters he had with people during his explorations, it was time he needed to be ended once and for all. Before Blackbeard sailed all the way to Bermuda, he stopped back again in North Carolina and met with his friend Stede Bonnet, who he had stolen his ship from before. He told Bonnet that if he would get pardoned by Governor Eden, that Blackbeard would load up Bonnet's ship with a bunch of gold and supplies that would support him. As this was taking place, 300 of Blackbeard's men were setting up camp on the coast of North Carolina. Stede Bonnet went to get pardoned. It took him about 3 days. As Stede got back, he noticed that Blackbeard did not hold up the end of the bargain. His ship was completely empty, no supplies or gold that was promised, nor people. Blackbeard was nowhere to be found.
He got a pardon about 3 days later. So he gets back out around the 18th or so of 18th, 19th of June. When he gets back out to get his ship and his crew, he boards the ship's empty. There's nothing on it, including anybody, and the hold is empty. He sees the camp that Blackbeard had set up. When we went over there, that's where he found David Harriet.
Bonnet noticed David Harriet, a former pirate, at the camp with majority of Blackbeard's crew. He questioned Harriet where Blackbeard went. Harriet told Bonnet that Blackbeard took everything on Bonnet's ship and put it on his own, took 40 of his best men, and sailed away into the sunset. The reason Blackbeard had to flee so fast was because Governor Spotswood dispatched a British naval force under Lieutenant Robert Maynard. Captain Gordon would lead the second ship. There were 2 ships, Jane and Ranger. Both men wanted Blackbeard dead. They arrested Blackbeard's old quartermaster and found out where they could find him. First, they went to North Carolina. Since Blackbeard had fled, they went further down the coast. The ships they were on had no cannons. Due to the heaviness, they couldn't carry them. They were loaded with axes, muskets, pistols, and cutlasses. As they thought about approaching him, they came up with a plan. If they went in as the British force, then Blackbeard would fire at once. They all dressed up as citizens, and when they got to where Blackbeard was hanging out, they noticed he was anchored down. That meant it was easier to attack. As soon as Blackbeard caught a glimpse, he warned them not to come any closer or he will attack. At that moment, as the British soldiers took off their disguises, shots were fired. The battle was on. Blackbeard cut the anchor and was off to sea again. The Ranger got stuck on a sandbar and Jane went sailing to attack Blackbeard. Blackbeard turned the ship around and shot a cannon right at the Ranger, killed every single one of them, including Captain Gordon. This was the first time on record ever of Blackbeard killing someone. Better yet, British soldiers. As Blackbeard almost taking over Jane, only seeing 2 more people standing on deck, he took 10 of his men and walks over to Jane. As soon as he was about to shoot Lieutenant Maynard, 20 or more British soldiers ran out from underneath the ship, where they had been hiding, attacking like no other. Blackbeard's death happened very quickly. Even though he was shot 5 times and cutlassed 20 times, he was not dead yet. It took one of the British to chop Blackbeard's head off, finally to kill the most toughest, notorious pirate there ever was. He died on November 22nd, 1718. The crew threw his body overboard. They took his head back to North Carolina, where they stuck it on a stick and put it by the seashore to show all of the passing ships that Blackbeard was finally dead. Blackbeard might have only been a pirate for 2 long years, but he was a pirate who was very smart, had very good strategies, who wasn't scared of anyone and scared everyone, who got what he wanted when he wanted it, and if not, there were consequences. His goal was not to kill people, it was to explore, exchange things, and encounter everything there was to encounter.